Alright, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the main event. Trying to stutter my way through a Lamp of Murmuur album review. Will I get through it in one day? I don't know. Let's get to the review. Lamp of Murmuur, one of my favorite newer black metal bands, just released a new album, and spoiler alert, it's really good. Since their inception in 2019, this one-man band's putting out raw, mysterious, and enchanting music and continues to carve out their identity in the black metal world by taking risks, adding more and more influences from outside the metal genre, and making their song compositions grander and more dynamic. He's also from my state, so that's pretty cool. The Dreaming Prince and Ecstasy is their most theatrical and complete project to date. If that sounds interesting, stay tuned for the rest of this review. I also don't have a camera yet, so enjoy me playing Five Nights at Freddy's, because I've been known to play it a lot. In the first Lamp EP, which is where I got into them, their sound took the dark, raw, and cryptic aesthetics of other one-man projects like Leviathan and Passage de Verre, as you can tell from the artwork and production, but the bulk of the music itself was more inspired by bands like Dissection and Immortal, and it focused on thrashier, melodic riffs and generally had a more epic and brighter sound than you expect from this kind of esoteric packaging. While it still fit within the confines of black metal, this EP showed notice that I was hungry, had a ton of creativity, and some very competent musicianship and songwriting right out of the gate. This was the formula that would serve as a baseline for Lamp of Murmuur's subsequent releases for them to build upon. The main theme would be the introduction of elements of 80s goth music, from the dramatic synths, post-punk drum beats, and shimmery guitar, to even a few instances of clean singing, which blended really well with their black metal sound. It didn't feel out of place at all, and I didn't even really pick up on it until after a few more listens. It's clear that Mr. Murmuur was my father, please call me Lamp, is passionate about this type of music as he's done some great covers of Christian Death and Dead Can Dance. I also can't ignore the sexual overtone to this era of his music, and I'm not talking about this cute, I'm an ancient vampire and I'm searching for my long-lost love thing that some bands have been doing recently. Closer to 9 Inch Nails is more the vibe that we're going for, pun intended. I mean, just take a look at these song titles. You've heard of Caller of the Storm, so get ready for Call of the Dominatrix. Saturnian Bloodstorm was another big step forward. The production was equally cold, but much clearer and less muddy. And this was an opportunity to let Lamb show off his guitar writing. Like I said, the dude can actually play, doesn't need to hide behind a muddy mix. This album was full of badass riffs and leads, and it felt so much bolder and less introverted than anything that came before it. And that brings us to this new one, and already I would say this sounds even better. In black metal, a lot of bands go for a sharper, trebly, high-gain sound for their guitars, and also kind of the whole mix. That's been the trend since the days of Bathory, and that's more or less the case on Saturnian Bloodstorm. But here, there's a lot more fuzziness to the guitar. There's a lot more mid-range, and it fills out the mix a lot more. It still sounds cold, but it's like slightly defrosted. I'm also not going to talk too much about the harsh vocals on here, because they're very similar to how they're done on Saturnian Bloodstorm, and while they are good and I like them, they're just not too much variety. It's kind of a deeper growl in the same vein of Archgoat and Profanatica. This album kicks off with a short instrumental, The Fires of Seduction, which is this dramatic piano-driven piece that sounds like you're in some type of fantasy game and it's a stormy night and you're about to invade a castle. And that transitions into the first real song, The Forest of Hallucinations, which is incredible, and kind of sums up the whole vibe this band is trying to go for. It's equal parts badass as it is dark and mysterious. The main riff is super catchy and I love the way the synths accent the tail end of it. The song starts simple and builds itself up in the first half, introducing lush synths and guitar layers to create this thick atmosphere, only to drop everything back down to a more thrashy riff. Then it builds up again until we get this flurry of swirling tremolo picking, and the main melody sounds more intense and epic until it finally hits the climax, and then we get sort of a calm after the storm. It drops down to this haunting lead guitar, and the last note slowly fades out the song. The whole thing just has a very enchanting feel, and it's a great use of dynamics. We then launch into Hate Gate, the Dream Master's Realm. And the first part of the song sounds like it could be written by Vreed or Enslaved. It starts out with this intense blast beat driven section, and then it goes into this stomping groove that's especially thrashy and very infectious. It even sounds like death metal at some points when the blast beats and chugs come in. Once again, I love the lead guitar and synths that tag the end of these riffs and just adds the right amount of flair. Towards the end, it drops down to just the synths, which are very fantasy video game-esque. The synths and guitar kind of mimic each other before joining together and then going into the most intense part of the song. We also get this deep-voiced monologue over the music, which is pretty cheesy, but it's also super short and doesn't feel out of place, so we'll give it a pass for that. In the intro of Reincarnation of a Witch, we get D-beats and a fluttery I Am the Black Wizards type section before getting into some heavy power chords and then a more aggressive blast beat driven sound. In fact, this entire song has a strong Emperor and Lymphonic art feel. It sounds like you're in the heat of battle. Halfway through we get echoey chorus guitar, which transitions into a slower and more ambient dirge. The intense tremolo riffs are still there, but they're more subdued. I love the bridge in particular. There's multiple slightly off-sounding melodies going on at the same time, and it's like they're all fighting for space. Like they're all trying to crawl out of the cloudy depths of this main riff. Angelic Vortex splits the album into two very distinct pieces, and it marks a dramatic shift in the entire sound of the album. If you're familiar with this band's music, then the first half of the album shouldn't be anything surprising to you. It's Lamp of Murmuur holding their core sound, and it's pretty much exactly what I'm looking for when I want to listen to a new black metal album. But those gothic elements that were explored on previous albums were pretty much absent from these first three songs, and they're brought back in full force for the rest of the album. You almost go from symphonic black metal to what at times sounds more like a Gary Newman project with a black metal sound font. The song itself is just a 2-minute instrumental, but it's a very beautiful sounding one. It mostly features this really cool, kind of watery sounding chorus guitar with a ton of reverb but some kind of subdued synths to back it up. Then we get into the first of a 3-part epic. The title track, The Burning Prince and Ecstasy, is split into 3 acts. As I mentioned before, this album is very cinematic, and this is where a lot of those cinematic elements come into play, and also where a lot of those gothic elements come into play. The first part is Moondance, and admittedly I haven't gone down the goth rabbit hole yet, so my knowledge of the genre is still extremely limited, but when I heard this song, the first comparison that came into my head was actually the Birthday Massacre. Basically, the main guitar tone that's been used throughout the album so far is just strumming away and laying the foundation. Drums throughout this song are relatively simple but very effective. You will definitely bob your head to this whether you like it or not. And here we actually get a proper clean sung chorus coming in the second half of the song. And his vocals sound really good here. They sound very smooth, they sound double-tracked, and there's a similar floaty, watery effect on them. And I like the lyrics in this part, even though I can't really tell what they're about. And there's an incredible guitar solo at the end that sells the emotional and heartfelt vibe of the song. I like that it doesn't clutter everything with notes and it gives the track space to breathe. It then smoothly transitions into part 2, which is called Twilight Orgasm, because Lamp is horny. This part is a very long intro, but it does enough to build tension and it shows off enough awesome guitar work to justify the length. It encapsulates the sound of a moody 80s power ballad, whether that be from the rock or the metal world. We get our second major part with clean singing. This time it's done a little differently, more in a deep crooning style. It's not quite as catchy as the ones on Moondance, but they still sound very smooth, they're very well done, and they match the more sentimental, darker sound of the rest of the song. And then comes the big epic conclusion to this 3-part story, The Fall. And I'm just gonna say this is the best song on the album. It's like everything in the past 2 songs was all to build up to this moment. It's flashier, it's the most metal forward out of the 3, and overall it just sounds the most invigorating. It pretty much launches right into big power chords and driving lead guitar, and that lead guitar continues to soar throughout the first 2 minutes. And it transitions into this kind of sing-songy part that also repeats towards the end of the song, where the harsh vocals are layered on top of the clean vocals. Then very thrashy riffing immediately follows this. The rest of the song is decidedly thrash influence. It also does have a legit chorus that repeats a few times, and yet again the vocal style is much different. This time it's an operatic singing style, and the chorus itself has a definite folk metal sort of feel. I am less of a fan of this, I prefer the moody style of the previous 2, but it's definitely a memorable chorus. I'm not sure what instrument is being played over the aggressive drums and guitar, but you hear it a lot in a lot of folk-influenced metal, and it makes the song sound more epic and fantastical. I know I've been gushing about the lead guitar playing throughout this review, but I just have to bring it up again for the last part of the song. The drums come in, which makes you anticipate something big is about to happen, and then the song is carried by this incredible and clearly very emotionally driven multi-stage guitar solo. And the song keeps getting faster and more intense and more explosive. Like I said, this is a really cool way to end the Burning Prince and Ecstasy saga. But then we get to the actual closer of the album, A Brute Angel's Sorrow, which is a straight-up ballad. There are no metal elements to be found here, it's mostly acoustic instruments. And 2 guest artists are performing vocals on here. One of them I'm already a big fan of, Crying Orc from that band, and Frank Iero, who was the rhythm guitarist for My Chemical Romance, who's played in a bunch of other bands. I don't know what the story was for getting him on this track, but what I do know is that everyone in here sounds great. Lamp does vocal duties of the first half, he does the deeper, smoother voice, and the other 2 come in the second half. One of them has a more desperate wailing kind of style, and the other has a more breathy voice. I think that one is Crying Orc. He's probably my favorite on here. I love the use of strings on here, and also the bassy kick drum emphasizing certain parts. It just makes everything sound so much more sorrowful. I like how they bring back the dreamy, reverb-soaked guitar in the very end, and I also love how they emphasize certain lyrics like "we fade, we ride," and then trailing off with the line built and raised by our emptiness. Overall, I was very impressed by what Lamp of Murmuur was able to achieve on this album. I think this is the most creative and artful project he's done so far. I would not be surprised if this was a concept album, considering the theatrical nature of it and just how well crafted and thoughtful everything is. There's a lot to love on here, and I would have to get pretty pedantic to find much to dislike, especially since this is one person's project. He had a vision for what this album would be and executed it very well. I'm curious to see if he'll try to go even grander on the next album. If you haven't heard this band, or you've been a fan of them for a while like myself, I highly recommend giving this one a listen. I'm giving this one a solid 9 out of 10. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe to see me ramble about music, go hiking, play video games, and a bunch of other things. Also, if you have any suggestions for what I should talk about or review next, please leave those down in the comments. I just listened to that new Perdition Temple, and it sounds great. I'm a big fan of that band, and I kind of want to review that one next. I was going to review the new Hooded Menace, but that's been out for a while, so I don't know if people would want to watch that. And there's a new Bloodhouse Nord, there's a new White Rune, a bunch of other stuff. So thank you so much for watching, and bye.